Something that has always set Zenless apart from the crowd is its vast cast of Thiren characters. We've seen a billion cat girls and fox girls times aplenty, but mouse girls? Shark girls? I'm sure somebody out there is able to name other instances of these, but for most of us, Ellen was our very first shark girl. New Eridu is populated with all sorts of unique races. In this video, we'll be covering all things Thiren, lifestyles, variability, and the difference between cat girls and cat girls. So what is a Thiren? Well, for starters, I want to highlight how clever the name Thiren is. The community has pieced together that the Greek term for beast is Thir, and the Chinese term for person is Ren. You know, in the most American accent I can muster. But put these together and you get Thiren, beast person. So what kind of beast people do we have? Well, before we start listing them off, I want to bring up a concept that I'm going to call the Thiren spectrum. On the two extremes, we have standard humans and full-on animals. In between, we have 3 points that most, if not all, New Eridans fall into. Side note, that's the official demonym that the game uses as far as I can tell, but is it just me or would New Eridites sound better? The low point on the spectrum is for humans with some animal features. A character like Nekomata, who is mostly human but with cat ears and tails, would fall in this range. The second point is for those who are more beast-like. A great example is Pulchra, who, while shares the human visage, is entirely covered with fur and fur patterns. The third point is about as far as we can go without going full beast. This is where I'd place characters such as Ben or Lucy's Boar triplets, where human resemblance starts to run fairly thin. I like the idea of a spectrum because it displays the vast variety in what New Eridu's Thirens have to offer. Low on the spectrum, you have your ever-recognizable catgirls, but a little higher up, you have a little bit more of an animalistic take on catgirls. See, I would consider Nekomata a cat girl, and consider Pulchra a cat girl. One last thing to note is that Thiren beastliness is no indication of intelligence. Lucy's boars don't speak and seem to have pretty primitive minds, but they're around the same place in the spectrum as Ben because they physically resemble beast more than human. Well, with this Thiren spectrum established, let's categorize all the recognizable Thiren characters. Among the notable cast, we are going to go over 11 NPC and 15 playable Thiren characters, spread across 13 Thiren breeds. Starting low on the spectrum and in general release order, we begin with Ellen Jo. Ellen is a shark Thiren, perhaps one of the most unique Thiren breeds in the entire city. From what we can gather, shark Thirens are likely quite rare, considering we see no mention of any others around the game. I once heard that Ellen collects shark-related merchandise because of this, though I was not able to find any mention of this. If you know more, leave a comment. Shark Thirens adopt their tail and teeth from their beast counterpart, with the tail being extraordinarily strong enough to fracture bones if handled without care, according to Ellen. Ellen herself has extraordinary strength at the cost of using so much energy, which is why she's seen with Candy so often. It's unknown if this is a trait exclusive to Ellen or if it's something shared across shark Thirens. Next, we have one of Ellen's friends from school, Mona. It's hard to spot, but she actually has 2 horns, signifying that she's a cow Thiren. It's easier to tell if you can see her tail, which you don't get a whole lot of opportunities to do. Since she is a cow Thiren, I'm going to skip discussing some of the potential traits inherited from her beast counterpart. You can infer that for yourself. She is the only known cow Thiren to exist in New Eridu, though I believe it's probable that there's many more out there, since Thiren rarities tend to vaguely reflect their real-world counterparts. That is to say, cats and cows are common, while sharks aren't as much so. Okay, on land, I guess. You get what I'm trying to say, right? Speaking of cats, Nekomata. Yes, she is a real character, no matter how many times she's stolen your 50-50. Nekomata exudes her cat side, verbally interjecting meows into her speech, and just generally acting like a cat. Ironically, more than Pulchra, which we'll get to later. Curiously, while Nekomata has a standard pair of cat ears, she carries 2 tails. Now, this is a real thing that cats can be born with, though it is extremely rare. The real reason behind this simply lies in the form of Nekomata. from real life. I won't go into it in depth. All you need to know is that in Japanese folklore, Nekomata are a kind of twin-tailed cat that are mischievous and malicious, and are obviously where our Nekomata got her name. Though it ends up being a bit of a misnomer. While Nekomata is mischievous, she never ends up being truly malicious. Aside from her physical attributes, Nekomata shares her great desire for fish with her cat side. She spends lots of time with stray cats around the city, watching their backs. The cats even repay her kindness by watching her back in return. Nekomata is also extremely agile, perceptive, and light on her feet, able to pounce and leap to her advantage in combat. If you didn't start playing Zenless because of Ellen, you are statistically likely to have started because of Jane Doe. My source is that I made it the f*** up. Jane is a rat Thiren with ears and a long tail being her signature rat attributes. When standing idle, her arms lay raised in front of her, resembling a real rat when standing on their hind legs. Rats are capable of controlling their tail, but Jane takes this idea to an extreme by having such precise control of her tail that it essentially acts as a third appendage. It does seem like a natural progression when we increase the brain's intellect to that of a human. Jane is a bit of a hoarder, mainly liking to collect snacks to bring them back to her mousehole, home. Her identity as a rat has both literal and figurative meanings, with her obviously being a rat Thiren, but also being a master of espionage, being the rat inside criminal organizations. There's one more fun play on her Thiren identity, which we will cover under our next character, Seth. Officially, Seth is a lynx Thiren, but it's easier to lump him in with the cats. Unlike some of the other Thirens, Seth doesn't have the same quirks from his beast side. He doesn't show any major cat-like tendencies. Instead, him being a cat is part of the joke between him and Jane. Usually, the cat holds power over the mouse, but in this relationship, Jane is always a step ahead of Seth. The mouse dangles the cheese in front of the cat. But yeah, unfortunately, there isn't much else to cover on the topic of Seth being a Thiren, since he's one of the few characters who don't really have any Thiren-related traits. Void Hunter Hoshimi Miyabi needs no introduction. She is a low-spectrum fox Thiren, characterized by her tall ears. Depending on who you ask, their height, varies. Her Thiren lineage dates back all the way to the third generation of the Hoshimi family, and likely even further. But without specific details, we can only really mention 3 other Hoshimi family fox Thirens: the unnamed third-generation Swordmaster, Miyabi's mother, and Miyabi's father, Soichiro. All of these Thirens are on the more tame side of the spectrum, only sporting tall ears. No tails, no special teeth, no fox-like tendencies or traits. You won't find Miyabi burying food, you'll find her burying the light deep within. The Hoshimi family does invoke a question revolving something we haven't talked about yet: breeding. When a mid or high spectrum Thiren breeds with a human, the result yields a low spectrum Thiren. This can be inferred, but I also read that it's mentioned in-game by an NPC in Lumina Square. Let me know what the conditions are if you happen to find them. The Hoshimi family appears to be very particular about staying low-spectrum fox Thirens. I really hope these fox Thirens are in abundance in New Eridu, because if not, it implies a whole lot of inbreeding. There's your awful thought for the day. Miyabi may be inbred. And on that bombshell, let's talk about Ju Fufu. Senior Fufu is a special one because she is a tiger Thiren. The reason I'm not lumping her in with the cats like Seth is because tiger Thirens have a very specific history to them. Before the fall of the old capital, there were many tiger Thirens that lived in a settlement up in the mountains, far away from New Eridu's urban streets. However, as fate would have it, during the fall of the old capital 11 years ago, a companion hollow formed within the settlement that would wipe out a reported 98% of the tiger Thiren population. The survivors were made up mostly of the sick, young, or elderly, and today, according to Fairy, there are no more than 20 tiger Thirens active within the city of New Eridu. Ju Fufu herself was fortunate enough to have been a disciple of Yunque's summit when the disaster occurred, though they were the first responders to the crisis and Fufu was met with it firsthand. The tiger Thirens as a culture seem to be rather more united compared to other Thiren breeds. Instead of mingling with the melting pot of New Eridu, they choose to stay secluded in the mountains. terrifyingly powerful inventions like the Tigerbane Bell suggest that they also possessed great ingenuity, seemingly implying a sort of technological or even spiritual mastery over ether. In terms of Thiren attributes, Jufufu can be seen with a tiger's ears, fangs, and tail. She even sports tiger fur patterns on her hair, though the reason she's still a low-spectrum Thiren in my book is because her skin isn't covered with fur. The last thing to mention is that she has claws, but they're technology. You can actually see them retract if you look closely in combat. Next up, Alice Timefield. Alice is a rabbit Thiren, as can be seen from her ears and dollop of a tail. Now apparently, the community has deduced that Alice is based on the real-life Netherland dwarf rabbit breed, which I think is really cool when you consider that Alice is most likely a walking reference to Alice in Wonderland. Netherland? Wonderland. Alice doesn't inherit any other traits or tendencies from her rabbit side, unless you want to count her obsession with symmetry as a perception thing from the fact that rabbits have good eyesight, which in and of itself is based on the myth that carrots improve eyesight, meaning the whole thing is void. The Timefield family contains other rabbit Thirens as well, with the only visually confirmed character being Alice's late father, Lionel Timefield. It's possible to assume the family is made up mostly or entirely of rabbit Thirens in the same vein as the Hoshimi family, though with only 2 characters to pull from, we're in the dark on that one. Komano Manato, a wolf Thiren that seems to be leaning more towards dog than wolf. Like most low-spectrum Thirens, Manato has the signature ears and tail. And this guy is ridiculously buff, like he barely fits in his dialogue portrait. However, this is most likely unrelated to the fact that he is a Thiren. At the time of making this video, we are right before the 2.3 patch, so specific info on Manato is limited. The story is the same for our next 2 characters, Lucia and Yidhari. They're getting lumped together because of our lack of information. But even though the patch isn't out, there's still plenty to observe, starting with Lucia. We don't know for sure which type of Thiren she is, but the community has deduced that she is most likely a sheep or goat Thiren. Her horns look strangely metallic, implying they may not be natural. We know she's a Thiren though because we catch a glimpse of her wagging her tail. For Yidhari, she is no doubt an octopus Thiren. Ellen finally has another seaborn Thiren friend. Yidhari commands her 4 tentacles with great control and precision, much like other Thirens with their tails. However, you may have noticed something. Shouldn't an octopus have 8 appendages? I kinda gave away the answer. 2 arms, 2 legs, 4 tentacles, totaling 8. Quite a cool little detail. We've got 2 final characters to cover for the low-spectrum Thirens, and much like the previous 3, they're going to be much more relevant in future content. Yi Shiyuan and his sister Yi Shengguang. Seeing as they are siblings, we can safely assume they are the same Thiren breed, but which one? I've seen lots of theories, though none that are super solid. The closest matches, in my opinion, are horse, dog, or, oddly enough, squirrel. Another theory that would be a very cool direction to go in is that the siblings are some sort of hybrid Thiren, since the ears and tail together don't seem to match any notable animals. It will likely take until Yi Shengguang's addition to the game for this question to be answered. I realize the perceived pointlessness of covering upcoming characters right before a patch drop, but there's always going to be a patch not far away, so perhaps we can revisit the topic of Thirens one day to cover all the new ones. With all the noteworthy low-spectrum Thirens out of the way, we can now move on to the characters I consider to be towards the middle of the spectrum. Thirens here tend to still have a very human silhouette, but are usually covered in fur and patterns on top of the typical ears and tail. It is here where we will start to see slight deviations in things like facial structure, which can be best displayed by our first character, Lycon. As our first mid-spectrum Thiren, Lycon is a wolf covered entirely with fur. His face protrudes for his nose and mouth, much like a wolf's head would. Within his mouth lie a set of unmistakably canine teeth, which he sometimes bears like a wolf. Behind him is a tail that he takes incredible care of, allowing it to be as fluffy as it is. Lycon is a very refined gentleman, showing that being higher on the Thiren spectrum does not mean behaving more beastly. Instead, Lycon controls his beast side and reserves it for times when it is necessary. His perception and scent senses are heightened compared to normal humans, which are most likely inherited from his wolf side. Unfortunately, we can't get a good look at his legs to see if they err on the side of wolf or human, because Lycon lost his legs and eye in an unknown past incident. Overall, though, I think Lycon is the shining example of a mid-spectrum Thiren, and sets the baseline for what we can expect with the upcoming characters. Next up is Asha, the manager of the 6th Street Godfinger Arcade. If you're like me, you may not have even noticed for a while that she is a Thiren. She is, in fact, a rabbit Thiren, and looking closely, her skin is a strange hue that leads me to believe it's covered in a thin fur coat. The reason I didn't notice she was a Thiren is because her ears are actually so large they're draped behind her head. Quite cool. They are also what confirm for us that she is a rabbit Thiren. Curiously, she doesn't have a visible tail. Judging by the size of Alice's tail, it's possible Asha just doesn't care about it and stuffs it into her pants. Looking at her face, her nose is that of a rabbit's. The combination of the nose and fur coat are what make me believe she belongs in the mid-spectrum rather than low. Truthfully, she should be in between. Her behavior suggests no beast influence, though we have very limited interactions with her to gauge from. Next, we have Pulchra. She is a mid-spectrum cat Thiren, as we can see from her full body of fur. If Lycon is the shining example of a mid-spectrum Thiren, Pulchra is the runner-up. Similarly to Nekomata, Pulchra has been observed to make verbal cat noises, though seemingly not as often, likely simply due to her more firm personality. Something I want to cover while on the topic of Pulchra is actually Thiren accommodation in clothing. If you look closely at NPCs around the game, you can see that clothing is made with Thiren bodies in mind. Pants have a spot on the back that allows for tail bearers to comfortably fit their tail into. A lot of thought has gone into integrating Thirens naturally into the world of New Eridu. So much so that, in fact, beyond the borders of New Eridu, such as the Outer Ring where society isn't as developed, we can see that characters like Pulchra don't have the tail hole. She doesn't seem to mind, but I bet it is uncomfortable for her. We actually have Pulchra to thank for a lot of the cat Thiren related trivia, so let's shoot a few off. Cat Thirens avoid tea milk because too much sugar is unhealthy for them. They avoid noodle soup because the oil and wheat noodles are unhealthy for their bodies. They find joy in gacha boxes because it's analogous to hunting and trapping prey. The plant catnip, if consumed, causes a hiccup-like effect in them that causes them to periodically uncontrollably purr. And they have allergies to, quote, some flowers. All that is implied to apply widely to cat Thirens, though, like all things of course, there is bound to be variance. Our final mid-spectrum Thiren was introduced to us at the same time as Pulchra. Mors. Mors is a part of the Vanquisher biker gang in the Outer Ring. He's an edgelord, and despite having a very similar mouth covering to Pulchra, has no apparent relation to her. He has the same ears, tail, fur, and facial structure combo of most mid-spectrum Thirens, except this time, we're not 100% sure what breed he is. It's easy to assume he's a wolf Thiren, but looking at how tall and narrow his ears are, it's possible he's a fox. Some dialogue certainly suggests wolf, but without confirmation, we can't be sure. And now we enter the domain of high-spectrum Thirens. Characters here, in general, bear more resemblance to their beast counterpart than their human counterpart. An argument can be made to split this tier into two, but for the sake of simplicity, I'll be covering it as if it is one. Let me know which characters you think belong slightly lower on the spectrum. The big bear himself, Ben Bigger. Ben is literally just a bear. He's got huge paws for his hands and feet, his body is one big ball of fur, and his head is that of a bear's. The joke behind his character is that despite being a hulking, intimidating bear, Ben is actually a sweetheart. This is a stereotype all bear Thirens have to bear. They're normal citizens of New Eridu, but are treated like wild beasts by unaware people. I wager this is why bear Thirens stick around each other, like we see with Belobog Industries' construction crew. Besides social reasons, bear Thirens also are known to possess a much higher ether aptitude than other races, making them great personnel for hollow demolition. Looking at Ben, the only real bear-related personality trait that can be noted is his love of honey. Specifically honey with caviar, which could also be a nod to how bears eat fish. Ah, the three little pigs, Grassy, Woody, and Bricky. These guys are sort of in between pets and actual boar Thirens. The reason I'm calling them Thirens is because of our next character. The boar triplets are non-verbal, and whether this is due to low intellect, immaturity, or both, we don't know. What we do know is that they are very loyal to their master, even through what is arguably torture. These little bamboo-like chunks have stub hands and feet, floppy ears, snout horns, and little curly tails. If you haven't picked up on it yet, their names are references to the Three Little Pigs story. A house made of straw, Grassy, a house made of wood, Woody, and a house made of brick, Bricky. And presumably at the end, the big bad wolf is Lucy. What we can assume is the matured form of a boar Thiren is what Big Daddy is. Unlike Grassy, Woody, and Bricky, Big Daddy is a very composed man who has a much more human-like visage. He's rolled with the Sons of Caledon biker gang for nearly his whole life, even looking after the current Outer Ring overlord Caesar King during her youth. His head does not resemble a human's, with a large snout and protruding horns. His feet appear to look closer to hooves, but his hands are standardly human. He doesn't have a visible tail, however, seeing as the boar triplets have small spiral tails, Big Daddy is most likely hiding one under his clothing. Next, we have this guy. I forget his name. He's a high-spectrum orangutan Thiren. His silhouette almost resembles one of the bear Thirens, being very large and round with an intimidating presence. His body is covered in orange fur, save for his hands and face, the latter of which very much resembling an orangutan. He rolls as a mercenary and doesn't really seem to have any orangutan-inspired personality traits. Since he's an unplayable side character that only appeared for one chapter, there isn't much else to cover on good old... I'm drawing a blank, whatever, we can move on. Brother to the bears is the huggable panda Thiren Han Yin Hu. He shares a lot in common with bear Thirens, with pandas being a type of bear themselves. His body is nearly identical in makeup to that of them, just with a panda-themed spin on things. Panda Thirens are reportedly quite rare to see, meaning Yinhu is essentially our only source of information as of now. According to him, they have good relations with bear Thirens, probably feeling a strong sense of kinship. He also says they have very thick skin that makes them adaptable to different temperatures. Now, if we indulge in a bit of stereotype here, pandas are known to eat. A lot. Yinhu is no exception to this, and it can be inferred that all panda Thirens are the same. In fact, Yinhu indulges so much that he's a chef himself, cooking meals for his fellow disciples on the regular. Rounding off our list is Zhao, Krampus representative and high-spectrum rabbit Thiren. The reason I've decided to place her here is primarily because of her rabbit-like feet. The rest of her proportions are very chubby but are ultimately humanoid. She's one big ball of fluff. Taking a closer look, she's got little buck teeth that are reminiscent of a bunny. Just like the other upcoming characters, our knowledge of Zhao will be expanded in the future, so keep an eye out for her banner. That's all the notable Thiren characters covered. But if you've been paying close attention, you may have realized that there's some characters missing that should probably be here. You see, technically, none of these characters are actually Thirens. The big one is Orphe. Yeah, I thought she was a Thiren too, but all evidence suggests her Thiren parts are mechanical. Orphe is a human clone of the deceased Orpheus, with the latter's Thiren identity being up in the air. And then, of course, the attached Magus is an intelligent construct with Orpheus's memories. If I had to assign a Thiren specification to Orphe, I'd say her horns make her look like a ram, but I've also heard people call her a dragon. But yes, Orphe is just a human with attachments. Except she can't be. If she's human, what's up with the ears? Hugo and Vivian were both omitted from the Thiren list because they aren't Thirens, but they curiously have elongated pointed ears, just like Orphe. There's no dialogue across the game that suggests these irregularities make them a different race. In a standard fantasy setting, characters like this would likely be elves. But in New Eridu, it's possible this is just an attribute humans can be born with. There's also the potential for Hugo to be a vampire with some of his implications, but I think he's just messing with us. Lastly, we have Sokaku. She is not a Thiren. Why? Because Thirens by nature are human-animal hybrids. Sokaku is not a human-animal hybrid. She is an Oni. The Oni are an entire race of people of their own, donning horns, pointed tails, and various vibrant skin colors. I cover the history between the Oni and New Eridu a bit in my Defense Force video, but unfortunately beyond that, we have very little information on them as a whole. It's very possible we revisit this loose thread in the future, so keep a keen eye out for any mentions of the Oni. That was a lot of Thiren. It was fun taking a walk around New Eridu to see the various breeds that populate it. I don't usually like asking this kind of thing, but every now and then it's a good idea for me to remind you that subscriptions and comments mean a lot to someone in my position. It allows me to continue making content without worry, and it genuinely puts a smile on my face when I see people discussing the deeper details in a game that so often gets reduced to its outward front. My name has been Glastic. Thank you for watching. Heed the Hollow's call.